Selamat pagi Bapak dan Ibu sekalian.
Selamat pagi, good morning.
Good morning. Right, and the honorable keynote speakers and moderator, Professor Wiku Adhisa Smito as Indonesian government spokesperson for handling COVID-19, Professor Arif Satria from Institut Pertanian Bogor, Indonesia, Insinyur Laksmi Dewanti, the Indonesian Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Dr. Budi Warsito, School of Postgraduate Studies, Universitas Diponegoro. Selamat pagi Bapak dan Ibu.
Selamat pagi.
Selamat pagi, good morning.
Selamat pagi.
Professor Putrajaya from Federation University Australia, Professor Magali Koch from Boston University, United States of America, Professor Fatimah Yusuf from University Putra Malaysia. Good morning, Prof.
Good morning.
Professor Robert Peacock from University of the Free State, South Africa. Good morning, Prof.
Good morning.
Dr. Sitaraman Padianathan from University Sheffield of the United Kingdom. And Professor Elke van Bug from School of Business and Economics, Rijksuniversiteit Amsterdam. Goedemorgen, Prof. Professor Purwanto as our today's moderator. Selamat pagi, Prof.
Selamat pagi.
Excellencies and distinguished participants. Good morning. We are glad to see you here again. My name is Gendis, and we will be your MC today. We would like to extend our welcome to Day 2 of the 6th International Conference on Energy, Environment, Epidemiology, and Information System, ICENIS 2021. After we end the Day 1 with great energy, we hope that you are ready to conquer Day 2 with high spirit and enthusiasm. For today, we will have plenary session and parallel session as well as closing ceremony. As for today's plenary session, the session will be led by Professor Purwanto, and there will be 5 keynote speakers here with us, and they surely are happy to present and engage in discussions. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and start our plenary sessions, but before, allow me to introduce Professor Purwanto. Professor Purwanto is a lecturer from Universitas Diponegoro. He obtained his bachelor degree in chemical engineering from Universitas Diponegoro, a diploma of processing technology from National Polytechnic Institute of Lorraine, and master's and doctorate degree of chemical processing technology from National Polytechnic Institute of Toulouse. As you can see here, Professor Purwanto has abundant experience on his work, such as Program Director and the Dean of School of Postgraduate Studies, Universitas Diponegoro. Now, Professor Purwanto is the head of planning and development of Universitas Diponegoro. His work concerns are on the environmental science. Excellencies and distinguished participants, without further ado, please welcome Professor Purwanto.
Thank you, Gedis. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and all participants of International Conference on Energy, Environment, and Information System, ICENIS 2021, School of Postgraduate Studies, Universitas Diponegoro. Good morning. Welcome to the second day of ICENIS. I hope you are always in a good health today. This morning, we start the conference with the plenary session. Our speakers, welcome our speakers, Professor Robert Peacock from Free University, African State, South Africa. Professor Fatimah Muhammad Yusuf from Malaysia, Ibu Laksmi Dewanti from Indonesia from Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Dr. Budi Warsito from School of Postgraduate Studies, Universitas Diponegoro, Professor Elko van Berg from Netherlands, and then and all of participants. Thank you very much for your coming for the second day of the seminars. From this plenary session, please, Professor Robert Pickett will deliver the speech on the first session of plenary speaker today with the topics crime and victimization in the era of United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Let me introduce Professor Robert Pickett. He is the president of the World Society of Victimology and also academic head of Department Criminology, Faculty of Humanities, University of Free State, South Africa, with the background education BA from Pretoria University in 1985, and also MA PhD also from Pretoria University in 2006 with a lot of working experiences. He is at the present as a professor and chair University of Free State, as academic leader, head of department, and also ministerial appointment and editorial boards such as Caderni del Dipartimento di Bioetica, Italy, Termida, Serbia, Ethnicity in Criminal Justice, USA, and also editor of Southern African Journal of Criminology and Victimology, editor also Victimology in Africa, and as United Nations Relation Committee, World Society of Victimology. So please, I invite Professor Robert Pickett to deliver the speech for the duration of 30 minutes. Please, Professor Robert Pickett, time and screen for yours.
Thank you so much, Professor Purwanto, for your warm welcome. Good morning, distinguished guests, all participants. It's a great honor for me to be here with you today. My background, as you've heard, is more within the context of law and victimology. But being with you here this morning, working with the interdisciplinary space, this is where the magic happens. So I'm very happy to be here with you and share with you. And I think this is the way of the future, is this transdisciplinary spaces. As you've heard, my presentation this morning is crime and victimization in the era of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Now, of course, with crime and victimization and of the cyclical nature thereof, has an enormous impact on individuals, communities, society, the economy, and the ecology. And as well, it presents with severe consequences for sustained development. So the impact can be physically, financially, emotionally, and socially. But this is the aim of my presentation here with you today, is to look at the importance of context when we are looking at environmental injustice. I'm going to give you also with a bit of a background as well in terms of the latest discourse within victimology, and that we can share with you the orientation we enjoy. So already some time ago in 1985, the General Assembly of the UN adopted the Declaration of Basic Principles of justice for victims of crime and abuse of power. And within this declaration, there are provisions in terms of redress, but access to criminal justice, as well as services to assist with recovery. With this declaration, and which I'm very pleased to mention to you as well, this declaration was firstly operationalized by the World Society of Victimology, of which I am fortunate at the moment to be the president of. So it has got a long history, about 35 years, where we've actually attempted to address harms, and the harms are much broader than individual harms. It is considered imperative to deal with collective harms as well. So traditionally, when people engage with the concepts of crime and victimization, the focus is on interpersonal victimization. But at least here we've got an instrument that actually moves away just from a legal definition of victimization to include also an abuse of power. I think this is very important, especially when we start engaging with state corporate crime, as far as the environment is also concerned. The victim label, therefore, is characterized by complexities, because it can also refer to a non-legal definition of what constitutes victimization. But what we do find is that due to the media, due to sort of mainstream agenda setting, that there's a demonization of the offender, and very little understanding of victim-offender cycles, whereas victims become offenders and offenders become victims again. So there are these sequences taking place. So what happens is that there would be a sentiment where offenders are sort of marginalized, very much influenced by positivism, where the emphasis is on abnormal characteristics within the person, psychopathology. Now, street crime actually constitutes a very small segment of the overall crime. So what happens is, especially in countries where there's a weak state, that you would find that there's an over-criminalization of street crime in order to deflect attention from the weak state. So thereby also to deflect attention from state corporate crime and broader socio-political concerns and imbalances and abuse of power as well. If we look, for instance, at the impact of corruption, it's far much more severe than what ordinary street crime will be. But this is more hidden, and this is the task as well, and from our discussions here today as well, to look at these more hidden forms and more subtle forms of victimization, where the duration is longer, it is more subtle, but the impact is enormous. If we take, for instance, organized crime, the organized crime has been identified as one of the most critical factors that actually stops development on the African continent. Now, so this label of victim, I would advocate that whenever we are engaging with crime and victimization, especially within the sustainable development context and also with reference to social and economic injustice, that we broaden the perspective in order to look at victimization as also part of a historical dimension. In other words, that we see victimization as part of a legacy of colonization, and also how this colonization still plays out today. We would know in terms of, from your own experiences and your own research as well, that the Global South in particular has been colonized, and most of the Global South. And also with the Global South, we've also had the lamentable crime of slavery. But the Global South is actually carrying the burden of environmental injustice. due to colonization. And then if we really want to address crime and victimization, we need to look at the colonial, post-colonial continuum and also look at macro and micro links between interpersonal victimization and victimization in broader society. So that it's not just simply an individual that is a psychopathic killer, but there's this hidden, bigger form of victimization taking place. If we do not address the legacy of colonization, I don't think we are going to make much progress in dealing with the underlying root causes of global inequality and global injustices. What we have seen is that, one way to deal with victimization would be through the provision of programs to victims of crime. There are a range of types of support available, but I would like also to alert the audience that whenever we are dealing with victimization on an interpersonal level, that we are careful not to psychologize away broader societal imbalances and injustices. So with this focus on trauma and healing, that deflects at socio-political concerns around victimization in a more broader sense. We also would notice that within the local context, the indigenous context, there's the hegemony of Western concepts of therapeutic interventions. In other words, so there's this importation of Western concepts of healing, of Western concepts of suffering, and that there's the Western approach of long-term therapeutic notions, based on Oedipus and electrocomplexes. I don't know how relevant all of this is. So when we are dealing with victimization, I think it's critical that we do not psychologize away broader societal injustices. Victim rights are human rights, but unfortunately, when we look at legislation, and you would know this from your own experiences in terms of the environment as well, laws on its own are simply not enough. It's not effective enough. We need to look at the nexus of the law with history, the nexus of the law with the political environment, with the economic environment, the social, and also importantly, the cultural environment. So what we find in the Global South is there's these Western-like institutions that are imported, but it fails to really address these broader victimization concerns. In terms of the data which we are working with, because of COVID, I think it is still a bit too early to really say what are the trends, but early studies do tend to suggest that there are differences in crime and victimization taking place at the moment. But really, to be able to be more accurate, we need a longer period in order to assess these patterns and trends. And this, of course, depends also on the importance of statistics and data and health statistics. So the capacity to have good data depends also, of course, on the resources between the developed and the developing world. But I would also recommend here that one does not only use official crime statistics, but also health data to give you a better picture. Now, if we look at the globalization of crime and victimization, and now I'm not referring to transnational organized crime, just to give you an idea of what is happening at a more grassroots level, we see that globally, 1 billion children between the ages 2 to 17 years have experienced some form of victimization in the past year. Now, the target 16.2 of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development also refers to end abuse, exploitation, and trafficking of all forms of violence and against and torture of children. So this type of trends are alarming, and we can certainly, when we talk about epidemiology, this presents to me more like a pandemic again, if we look at this widespread incidences of crimes just against one vulnerable category. So in addition to interpersonal victimization of vulnerable groups, a very hidden form of victimization is conflict. Conflict worldwide. I can count on my one hand which country is not engaged in some form of conflict. So whenever we look at crime and victimization, we tend to focus on the more traditional types of crime and forgetting that a large portion of the globe is involved with some form of conflict. Battles, violence against civilians, explosions, remote violence, riots, and strategic developments. So in fact, a very useful index to consult country-wise and regional-wise in terms of peace and conflict studies is the Global Peace Index. And it shows here that in 2021, that since the year 2010, the number of conflicts globally has increased by 88%. Now, we are looking at, as I mentioned, at the way the pandemic is playing out in terms of conflict and peacefulness. But I think it's quite obvious, one can make a fair deduction that as a result of lockdowns and the rising economic uncertainties, that one can expect more civil unrest. But yes, it is certainly, I think, a crime and a victimization vulnerability, the changing economic conditions which are experienced at the moment worldwide. And this will have an impact on political stability and violent demonstrations. So in short and in summary here is that we also need to be mindful of the less visible forms of victimization, like state crime, especially when we start looking at state corporate crime, corruption, in order to deal effectively with this phenomenon within the context of sustainable development. Ironically, it's only quite recently that crime prevention has gained official recognition as a global priority. We see that the UN's Millennium Developmental Goals that preceded the 2030 Agenda did not consider crime and victimization as important thematic components of the policy agenda. So the need to actually incorporate these Millennium Goals, we've seen what emerged from that was that the most emphasis was placed on impoverishment, and in particularly in terms of the developing world. Though with the Millennium Goals, priorities such as infrastructure and energy were absent from the list together with the omission of crime, justice, or security in the MDGs. So as a framework, the Sustainable Development Goals extend the Millennium Development Goals in many ways, but in particular by seeking to link the social, economic, and environmental aspects of the goals. Rich and poor countries are committed to achieve the 17 goals and targets by the year 2030. There are 169 targets that have been identified, and that provides with a universal framework for the realization of human rights and environmental sustainability. Within this, and especially with SDG 16, there is a drive to reduce violence and homicides, and also to halve traffic deaths and to eliminate violence against women and children, and to ensure equal justice for all. These drives include targets, funding, development of human capacity, and measurement of the outcomes. Now, you may be familiar with these different SDGs. We see that the first one is about ending of poverty in all of its forms everywhere. The second one is zero hunger, good health and well-being. The third one, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and also to address the inequalities within nations and between nations, and then also to arrive at sustainable cities and communities, and to also be responsible in terms of consumption and production, and then climate action in SDG 13, and life below water, which we call blue criminology, and life on land, and then 16, which is the focus of a lot of criminological expertise and etymological concerns, would be the peace, the fostering of peace, justice, and strong institutions. And all of that would boil down to partnerships for the goals. Goal 16, I just want to quickly just highlight here what Goal 16 is about, because crime and victimization is a multifaceted phenomenon, and it concerns with inequalities. It is not just about law and order. There are the root causes that need to be addressed. I've just given you an example of some of the targets that would speak to the SDG goal, and in particular Goal 16. Then the target would be to reduce all forms of violence and related deaths everywhere, to end abuse, exploitation and traffic and violence against children and torture of children, to promote the rule of law and equal access to justice for all, and then also to deal with the illicit arms flows and to strengthen the recovery and return of stolen goods. Corruption is a concern, and then also accountable and transparent institutions at all levels. So all of this would require a participatory and representative decision-making at all levels of government and society, and to broaden the participation of developing countries in institutions of global governance. Yes, we need to have by 2030 a legal identity for all, including birth registration and public access to information and fundamental freedoms in terms of international agreements, and to strengthen relevant national institutions through cooperation and capacity, and then to have non-discriminatory laws and policies for sustainable development. So all of these sound very positive. We see in terms of the SDGs in general, unfortunately, already prior to COVID, that the progress with the SDGs have been very uneven, and many countries were not on track to meet the goals by 2030. So in terms of the social, ecological justice, the natural environment, as you would know from your own research, continues to deteriorate at an alarming rate. Also, with the inequality of crime and victimization, this is a major concern. And this takes us back to my introduction in terms of, if we really want to deal with inequality of crime and victimization, we actually need to revisit the global landscape. And actually, in my opinion, what we need to do is, if we look at climate injustice in particular, that it may be useful to engage with TRCs, Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. Some of this is already taking place. There's some movement in terms of Belgium. We've also seen France that is engaged now with the former colonies. But yeah, we simply need to understand that inequality is the biggest concern in terms of crime and victimization. This leads to marginalization, especially of vulnerable groups, of regions and of countries. And then there's also the concern of intersectionality, which is a gender concept where there is an interplay between different structures in society, such as race and gender and age, and even sexual orientation and social class, and that you can, as a result of these structures in society, can become sort of blocked in opportunities for full expression. The Secretary General Antonio Guterres at the Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture in 2020 referred to inequality as an issue that defines our time. And inequality presents with the danger to destroy world economies and societies, structural inequalities, environmental degradation, and the climate crisis and climate injustice. These are all impediments to peace and global risks that have been ignored for decades, with the global south suffering the most, but of course with consequences to all worldwide. If we take these SDGs and look at the very latest research in terms of what has been achieved and what is happening, and this is now prior to COVID. So the situation has changed remarkably since COVID, but before COVID, 4 billion people did not benefit from any form of social protection in 2016. So imagine how this has been made worse now with the pandemic. A further 71 million people were pushed into extreme poverty into 2020 as a result of COVID. And then, of course, natural disasters also exacerbate poverty with a 23.6 billion economic loss from 63 countries all over the world. And another concern is that 21.3% of children under the age of 5 are stunted in growth. That constitutes about a figure of 144 million. So within lifespan development, when a child is stunted in growth, this affects normal development. We see that it affects the cortex, and it affects, it has a physiological impact on cognitive functioning of the child, which hinders at a later stage the ability for abstract thinking and also therefore to really evaluate high-risk situations. In terms of the sustainable goal number 2, to end hunger worldwide, we see that we have got a threat here to our food systems. My own research has shown that very often, despite parental love and care, we find children on the street supporting their families through survival sex, or which is also known as prostitution, through begging, in order to bring some money home. So this is the kind of phenomena we have in terms of something as basic as the right to have food. We see in 2017 already that less than half of the global population was covered by healthcare. In terms of quality education, the SDG 4, over 200 million children will be out of school in the year 2013. Gender equality, we have noticed that there's a rise in domestic violence because of lockdown conditions. And in some cases of domestic violence have increased by 30% in some countries. Clean water and sanitation, the status quo here is that 4.2 billion people in 2017 lack safely or managed sanitation. So if we look at only 3 billion people worldwide lack basic hand washing facilities at home. This just shows also how the pandemic has exposed these fault lines in our societies, these gaps between the haves and the have-nots. In 2030, it is expected that water scarcity could displace 700 million people. In terms of affordable energy, we need to scale up sustainable energy. At the moment, 798 million people lack electricity. The aim would be to decarbonize to zero by 2050. And of course, we are lagging behind terribly within this context. Economic growth and decent work.
Prof. Robert, excuse me, you have 5 minutes more on this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we see that 1.6 billion workers have lost their livelihood in the economy. The industry innovation infrastructure is supposed to build resilient infrastructure. But again, we see that in the developing context, that only 35% of the population have access to credit. This is the important one, to reduce inequality within and among nations. And then we've noticed that the global recession actually had an impact on a minimization of support. In 2017, 420 billion, in 2018, 271 billion. So cities are supposed to be made safe, but then we can see that there's an increase of slum areas in cities, even in 2018 already. In terms of sustainable consumption and production pattern, rising fossil fuels still contributes to the climate crisis. So yesterday we heard all about climate concerns and climate action and change that needs to take place, and with the planet warming, and also with the hottest temperatures ever recorded. And concerning 14, there's also a concern around the oceans, with acidification of the oceans continues. But some good news that there has been a protocol assigned. So life on land, we've got it here to protect and restore sustainable use, but only a third of 113 countries are actually on track to restore and promote sustainable ecosystems. In terms of peace, justice, and our strong and to develop strong institutions, we've noticed that at the moment, actually this was before the pandemic already, an increase in the number of countries that use long-term prison sentences. In fact, our prisons are worldwide 60% overcrowded. When we are talking about peace, justice, and strong institutions, I think also within a more decolonizing framework, it would be important to realize that research also shows that with proactive policing within the developed context, such as in America or even Australia, actually targets minority groups. Therefore, there is this stereotypes around race and gender that actually speaks or filters into our criminal justice system. And this is a concern. We've had the example of apartheid in South Africa, where the criminal justice system, a strong system, was used. And we see this within the UN policies and documents, a lot around rule of law. I just want to say that this is a reactive response to conflict, and that we really need to address the root causes rather than over-criminalizing. Then, of course, we need to implement partnership. Now, just here, some concluding remarks. The pandemic provides us with opportunity for recovery. We need to increase our interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary character of our research. And what is required is a framework of linking the local to the global, so that we actually have these different role players as co-owners of our victims' concerns to advance an emancipatory agenda of leaving nobody behind. What is a concern is too often our policymakers tend to rely on resilience and strong communities, and I think this actually distracts from really solving the problem. So it's expected of communities to be strong because we cannot fix that, but I think that is blame shifting, and that we certainly need to address the problems rather than to ask communities to continue to be resilient. What's important in conclusion here would be that we use a cultural lens to view the manner in which victimization plays out in society. What we have learned from the pandemic, which we already know from a long time already in African culture, is that the values of communality. So if I am affected, you are also being affected. So we are all sort of bound up in the sharing of a greater whole. But this is diminished when others are oppressed, tortured, or treated as if they are less than what we are. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prof. Robert, for the complete and clear presentation related to the crime and victimization in the era of SDGs by covering all the SDGs items and the issues concerning inequality of crime and victimization, marginalization, and also intersectionality. So thank you very much, Prof. Robert. And you have many questions in the Q&A, and that it is possible to answer directly. And the discussion after the presentation, all of speakers in this morning. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, all participants, the second presentation will deliver by Professor Fatimah Muhammad Yusuf. That the title of a presentation is The Impact of COVID-19 on the Aquatic Environment and Potential Implication and on aquaculture and fisheries industries. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will introduce Professor Dr. Fatimah Muhammad Yusuf. She is the professor at the University Putra, Malaysia, with the background of education, BA in Zoology from Drew University, New Jersey, USA, Master and PhD in the Fisheries and Wildlife from Michigan State University, USA, and she's got the PhD in 1987 with the working experience from 1980 as a lecturer at the University Putra, Malaysia, associate professor in 1991, professor in 2000, and at the moment also as a fellow of Academy of Sciences Malaysia. Please, Professor Fatimah, yeah, time and screen is yours. The presentation for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Professor Purwanto, for the kind introduction. I try to get my slides on now. I'm having a problem here. I don't know why I'm. I cannot get on the slideshow. Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Okay, but it is okay.
Okay now. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to this conference. Thank you, ICENIS 21, under the leadership of Professor Tree. Thank you very much. My topic today is on impacts of COVID-19 on the aquatic environment and potential implications on aquaculture and fisheries industries. Okay, let's walk along this list here. First, we have a snapshot snapshots at the effects of COVID-19 on the aquatic environment, looking at the positive effects and negative effects of COVID, and try to find out where the sources of this COVID and how they are transmitted into the natural water bodies, what are the transmission routes, and perhaps also look how fisheries and aquaculture industries are impacted by this COVID-19 pandemic and mitigating measures, if I may, and finally a brief conclusion. Okay. Okay. Human aquatic environment and aquatic nexus is a very, very important concept because aquatic environment provide us food, provide us all the services that we need. Okay, as we all know, our Earth, 70% is actually underwater. However, only 1% actually is freshwater, 97% in the sea and 2% in the polar regions. Okay, so this is a very limited resources. You remember yesterday, Professor Koch mentioned that 1 billion people are actually do not have access to clean water, and 2 more billion people are living in stress water stress regions. And today also Professor Robert Peacock mentioned about this aquatic ecosystems, the sanitation and all that. So it means that our water resource is very finite, very limited, but we are lucky in Asia mainly. Our water comes from the upstream, very nice, very clean, trickle down to the rivers and lakes, and finally make its way to the open seas. So all these aquatic ecosystems actually provide us with all kinds of goodies for our life. For example, they provide us all our provisions, our water, our food, our medicines, energy, etc. And in addition to that, they provide us regulatory services, control our pollution, control our erosion, mitigate our flood, regulate our climate change, and also give us the ecological services, our nutrient cycle, our hydrological cycle. All the cycles, the ecological cycles actually are very, very important to our lives. And also our aquatic ecosystems provide us recreation, education, all other cultural services that we need to make a very, very harmonized human society. Okay, so we understand this nexus between aquatic environment and the ecosystem services that they provide. And here we have, this aquatic ecosystem continuum, as I said, running from the upstream, through the bushlands, providing us services. And we have our human society here. There's a very good relationship. But however, even without COVID, our environment are already under stress. There are many stresses resulting from our activities, our human activities. We are not very kind, actually. We are not very kind to the environment. Okay, so with the presence of COVID, we have to be locked down. The people have to be locked down in their homes, and so they cannot do any more mischiefs. Therefore, under the circumstances, the environment has the time to improve. Okay, so after the lockdown, at least for the first few months, we see the improvement in water quality, in aquatic life, in our water bodies. However, with the prolonged pandemic, this positive impacts actually translate into many, many negative impacts. Okay, we will see later on, but after a long time, the COVID-19 killed thousands, millions of people globally, and pose the human risk and cost pollution, economic loss, etc. So there are many negative impacts as well related to COVID. Okay, so what are the environmental stresses actually, even before COVID? Before we have pollution, everybody knows about pollution. We in our rapid development, economic development, we have pollution resulting from our activities, hotels, agriculture areas. We have oil and grease from the shipping. We have heavy metals from the industries. We have pesticides from the agriculture. We have all kinds of pollutants coming into our aquatic ecosystems. And at the same time, people change the ecosystems from, for example, from mangroves to shrimp farms. So that will also change the environment. And we have also over-exploitation of resources. We have overfishing. Fish are fished to the last piece, I guess. Okay, and we have climate change that gives stress to our environment. So because of this, we have consequences, which are harmful actually to us. Our polluted environment, our eutrophication. We have algal blooms, the toxic algal blooms, the red sea, the sea, red tides, in decline in biodiversity, and we have losses of resources. Okay, so let's look at what are actually the positive impacts of COVID-19 on the aquatic environment. Okay, so obviously, as I said earlier, we have improved water quality, cleaner water, less turbid, low toxic compounds, and so on. Okay? And in addition, we have aquatic life improved. We have more fish, we have more larvae, we have more spawning grounds that can actually support the increasing wild stocks, and we have high survival of all the aquatic organisms, right? And we have improved biological recruitments because when the people, the fishermen, and all the illegal fishing, for example, for example, we have reduced fishing pressures. We have less fishing mortality. That provides the chances of fish to have higher spawning rates and higher productivity. So all this happens when there are no human activities actually stressing the aquatic environment. And of course, we finally, with all this improvement, we will also have improved biodiversity. We have more species. We have different kind of fish and so on. Okay, let's look at some examples of the positive impacts of COVID-19. In Malaysia, we call this lockdown MCO, means movement control order. So this is an example I'm showing you in our Penang estuary before the pandemic. Look at the water coming out from the river. Like I guess Jakarta River has the same thing. So we can see these black fumes coming out from the estuary. And after just about a month of lockdown, on 28th of April, the water changed to another color. It's better, greener. Okay, and if you have prolonged lockdown, maybe water will continue to improve. Similarly, in Seagate River. Seagate River is a very famous polluted river in Johor, near Singapore. Seagate is the name translated into Bahasa Malaysia from Seagate. So it was black, but after the COVID lockdown, the water becomes clear. Similarly, in Klang River. Klang River flows right through Kuala Lumpur. Very dirty river. And after a few months of pandemic lockdown, the water also shows improvement. Okay, not only rivers, lakes also became cleaner. This is Putrajaya Lake, the famous man-made lake in Malaysia, our new federal territory. So the water in this lake actually improved in terms of water quality index from class 2 to class 1. Okay. In other parts of the world, we can see the similar improvements in terms of water quality. For example, this is in Venice during the lockdown. You know, Venice is a very famous tourist area. Lots of boats, lots of activities there. So before the pandemic, you can see the water is quite turbid. This is from satellite. And after the lockdown, the water becomes clearer, the transparency increased. This is the coastal waters in India. Before COVID, we can see the concentration of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll actually is the phytoplankton cells in the sea. So if you have a lot of phytoplankton cells, it means that the water is not very healthy. Okay. So before COVID, we can see more green colors here to show that this is rich area, eutrophic seas. But after COVID in April 2020, so some areas actually changed to blue color, indicating that the chlorophyll concentration decreased with the COVID lockdown. Okay, go to Morocco. Morocco, in the seas, the coastal waters of Morocco, this is class D water, okay, before COVID-19. But after COVID, the water changed to almost class A and class B. So this is amazing, what pandemic can do for a while, okay? So in India, in lakes, Ben Banat Lake, before and after lockdown, similarly, chlorophyll, this is chlorophyll concentration again in the lake, improved, become less in amount. And similarly, the suspended particles here, improved by 34%. So after the lockdowns, things, seems to get better for the aquatic environment. However, these positive changes are not lasting. Okay. Look again at the Penang estuary. Okay. This is in February 2021. Okay, we saw just now April 2020. So after they relax the MCO, so people can go to work, factories can open, the water becomes gray again on the way to becoming black. Okay, the Klang River in Kuala Lumpur becomes very turbid. So all coming back to the original condition. Okay, so we can say that the effects of this lockdown very temporary, because lockdown is not forever. People have to go out and start normal life, if possible. Otherwise, we can die of hunger instead of from COVID. Okay, so positive effect effects do not last long. Water quality return to original polluted states once lockdown is over. Aquatic environmental degrade is actually mainly due to the anthropogenic activities. If there is anything that, any lesson that we learned from this COVID pandemic, actually all the stresses, all the problems in the aquatic environment actually due to the human activities. Okay, so during, when humans have their ways of doing things, they have problems. We have problems, sewage problem, we have the industrial waste, agriculture waste, and so on. So if you want to continue these positive effects, then we have to have, proper policy and regulation in place to minimize these human impacts on our aquatic ecosystems. Okay, now that we have looked at the positive impacts, let's examine the negative impacts of COVID on the aquatic environment. Okay, aquatic environment. These are the problems from COVID. Increase of plastic pollution, increase of medical waste, municipal waste, these impactors, and of course, all these actually increase the risk of food security. For humans, in terms of human, we have contaminated waters because of poor sanitation, okay, and we have contaminated foods. We may have all this fishery and aquaculture also contaminated because of the COVID. Okay, all these negative impacts actually affect our human health, disrupt our fishery and aquaculture production, and actually maybe disrupt supply chain as well, and finally cause loss of income to many people. Okay, one of the most important negative impacts of pandemic COVID-19 actually is the increase of medical waste. The PPEs, pharmaceutical waste, disinfectants, and so on. And this actually cause exposure and transmission, of the COVID. In the beginning of COVID, actually, billions, actually, this is a study done by Young et al., 2020, billions actually of plastic waste in terms of masks and gloves actually are thrown into the aquatic ecosystems. This is an example of Klang River in April after the COVID. You can see all this mask in the river. It's huge, actually, amount of solid waste from the medical waste, okay? Because people just throw their mask everywhere, okay? So all this actually give risk to our human health through direct contact. We can have direct contact like this, or we can have COVID through aerosol transmission. But in addition to that, we also can have ecological risk that affects our ecosystem health. For example, if we have our WWTPs, which is wastewater treatment plants, leakage, some of this COVID can actually enter our water bodies. So this is a study done by Rimoldi in 2020. Last year, a lot of studies actually done last year after COVID that shows that there's a detection of COVID RNAs actually in the river already. Okay.
Prof. Fatimah, excuse me,
Yeah.
the time for your presentation, 5 minutes again.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So
I can make it fast. Okay, this is another negative impacts from microfibers getting into our ecosystem, and chemical pollution from disposal of plastic waste. I didn't believe when I read this. How can our face mask have heavy metals, have leachable toxics, and all these nanoparticles, fibers, and so on. But when these papers actually published in a high-ranking reputable journals, and they provide all the proofs, scientific proofs, for example, lead grains and so on. Okay. So plastic residues actually very, very also important in aquatic ecosystem. This shows that in Asia we have the highest tons of plastic waste into the aquatic environment, which goes into the landfill, and this causes leaching and problems to the aquatic ecosystem, the hydrosphere. Okay, and also the plastics have been shown to cause mortality to shrimps. This is different species of shrimps. If we increase the concentration of the plastics, the shrimp mortality increase. And similarly, the turtles also increase. The death of the turtles also increase because they eat the plastics thinking that they were jellyfish. Okay, so other impacts, negative impacts from drugs, disinfectants, and antiseptics, and so on. And what are the sources of this COVID? They are from the hospitals, the quarantine centers, and all the places where we can get the COVID from the COVID patients. But there is no problem if we have good management, have good collection, we have good segregation of of the waste and storage and treatment, very good disposal. But the problem comes when we have poor management, and this happens in poor countries, poor developing countries. We have untreated waste going into our rivers. We have partially treated waste leakage into the water bodies. So this causes problem. Okay, and the worst thing is this wastewater treatment facilities actually is okay in high income countries. They have very high and very good treatment, but we look at the middle income countries, the low income countries, we feel very sorry because with the COVID around, a lot of waste actually carrying COVID particles can go into our aquatic ecosystems and affect ourselves again. So it goes in a cycle. So this is study in Ecuador, showing that raw sewage discharge into urban rivers already containing COVID particles. All right, movement of contaminated waters. This is how it goes, from the hospitals and so on, goes to the municipal waste, but this water can be reused or discharged into our natural environment. But we have to make sure that where there are COVID cases, a lot of COVID cases, right, we have to minimize this reuse of water, okay? So this is the transmission route. Contaminated feces from hospitals, quarantine house, leakage into the through the piping and so on, and contaminate our ecosystems. So we should protect actually our drinking water plants because this is very important for our health. And in addition to that, we have leakage of COVID-19 to groundwater. If we have leakage in septic tanks, and this will actually pollute our aquifer as well. Okay. So that is a technology to actually to overcome this, for tracking COVID and prevent the spreading, what we call water-based epidemiology approach, WBE. So we should do very careful monitoring and assess the data analysis detection information at the National Digital Observatory, and then provide this data to the government and also the public health responses so that proper treatment can be done to prevent the transmission to the susceptible population. Okay, so I want to actually to look at the effects of on the fisheries and aquaculture, but I don't think I have time. Maybe suffice for me to say that fisheries and aquaculture very much depend on the health of the aquatic environment. So if we do not have healthy aquatic environment, then our industries, our source of food will be affected. Okay, this is actually graph drawn to show the countries in Asia, because in Asia, our aquaculture and fisheries are very, very dominant feature of our countries. So we can see Indonesia, Philippines are very affected. Okay, this is some positive impacts on the fisheries, but we also have negative impacts to the fisheries from COVID. Okay, I will not dwell on that because I think Professor Purwanto is Okay, I will stop here. There are many disruptions caused by COVID, but finally to be effective, we have participation. We need participation from the government, from industries, from the NGOs, and from the public, all working together to prevent the spread of this lockdown. Okay, so conclusions, COVID-19 has both positive and negative impacts, and that how we handle this pandemic will determine our aquaculture industries, fisheries industries, and determine our human society, the health, the socioeconomic livelihood, and socioculture. So with that, I pray and hope, we pray and hope that COVID will go away and our nexus, aquatic environment, food will remain healthy, so that like Prof yesterday, Prof Wiku said, for us to we need healthy environment to ensure what did he say? To ensure health, sustainable survival for our human race. with that, thank you, Prof. Sorry for the time. Thank you very much and take care.
Thank you very much, Prof. Fatimah. Excuse me for the limitation of presentation due to the next presenter, and we have also more time for discussion. That topic is very interesting to discuss. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, all participants, the next presentation is from the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Welcome, Ibu Laksmi Dewanti at the ICENIS 2021. We thank you for coming and taking the time to deliver a presentation on the topic, the impact and lesson learned of COVID-19 pandemic to the first NDC Indonesia. I will introduce Ibu Laksmi Dewanti with her vast experience in the environmental field at the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. At the present, Ibu Laksmi Dewanti is the Director General of Climate Change, Ministry of Environment and Forestry Indonesia, and also as a national focal point for United Nations Framework Conventions on Climate Change, UNFCCC. With the background education, engineer from agriculture engineering, and also MA in the field of environment development and policy, with the vast working experience, such as a researcher at the Center for Environment Research, Bogor Agriculture Institute, and also various position and assignment at the Bapedal, various position and assignment at Ministry of Environment, Assistant Deputy Minister for Environmental Economics, Assistant Deputy Minister for Environmental Data and Information, Director of Performance Assessment of Hazardous Waste Management, Senior Advisor to the Minister of Environment and Forestry for Industry and International Trade, and Global Environmental Facility Operation Focal Point for Indonesia, and also as a Vice President of United Nations Environmental Assembly from 2018 until the present. So I invite Ibu Laksmi Dewanti to give the speech for 20 till 20 minutes and follow directly by Q&A for 15 minutes. Ibu Laksmi Dewanti, time and screens for you.
Thank you, Pak Purwanto. Thank you for the kind introductions. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, all participants, speakers, do me apologize for not mentioning your name by one, as I only have 20 minutes for delivering my remarks or presentations. It is my honor to be here, to be part of the ICENIS event. I believe this event will be a fruitful one and enlighten our perceptions toward the current COVID-19 pandemic. So allow me at this important event to share with you some informations on policies, programs regarding the climate change in Indonesia, as well as the lesson learned that we draw from the current COVID-19 pandemics. My name is Laksmi Dewanti. I'm the Director General for Climate Change at the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. So yeah, let me use my 20 minutes to be optimal. Yes, my presentation will consist three scope, the commitments, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and lesson learned. So let me start by informing you the commitment of Indonesia with regard of the climate change. As we all probably know that Indonesia is one of the 197 parties to the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So as a parties to the UNFCCC, indeed, Indonesia is very committed and continuously improve its effort towards reductions of greenhouse gas emissions at the national levels, as to contribute to the global target in maintaining the increased surface temperature below 2 degrees Celsius. So if we are talking about the current regime of the climate change, we are talking about Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement has been agreed by the global community back in 2016. So starting from that, even before Paris Agreement, there was a Kyoto Protocol as a regime, as a protocol to guide all the parties toward the climate change mitigation and adaptations. So Indonesia has been actively in this agenda since 1992. So it has been years, decades. So now we are in 2021. We are now under the Paris Agreement arrangement. The Paris Agreement arrangement has just started 1st January this year, 2021. And as a parties, Indonesia has ratified the Paris Agreement into its national regulations. So we ratified the Paris Agreement back 2019 through Act number 16, year 2016. And following the ratifications, Indonesia submitted its first NDC. NDC is the nationally determined contributions. It is a commitment from parties from individual countries in reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. So it was 2016, and then in 2019, Indonesia launched its roadmaps, NDC adaptation as well as NDC mitigation roadmap. And this year, we just recently submit our updated NDC to the Secretariat of the UNFCCC, together with the long-term strategy and low-carbon climate resilience document. So these are the documents that guided all the mitigation and adaptations activities and action in Indonesia. Just to get you know with our NDC, nationally determined contribution, if you can see, sorry for a small font, we have already set the targets. Indonesia committed to reduce its greenhouse gas emission by 29% compared to business as usual scenario by 2030. That's the unconditional target. So with or without support, Indonesia will reduce 29% compared to business as usual scenario. If there is international support, then Indonesia will increase its greenhouse gas emission up to 41%. So the target has been divided or distributed into 5 major sectors: energy, waste, IPPU. IPPU is the industrial process and product use, agriculture, and forestry and other land use. So each individual sector has already target or distribution target on how many percent they need to reduce their greenhouse gas emission. our NDC, it's not only consists of the mitigations. Unlike many other countries, Indonesia regard adaptations of climate change as important as the mitigation. So within our NDC document, we clearly stated that adaptation is important for Indonesia because Indonesia, by geographical position, is very vulnerable for various hydrometeorological disasters, such as earthquake, tsunami, storm, long dry season, droughts, flood, and that kind of disasters. So we put the adaptations effort into our NDC as well. So there was the commitment of Indonesia. So I hope that I already inform you how committed Indonesia and how serious we are in Indonesia in combating the climate change, in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. So starting last year, beginning of last year, we have the COVID-19 pandemic. So what really the impact of COVID-19 pandemic from the climate change point of view, from the commitment to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions? Distinguished colleagues, Madam Fatima has already informed us the impact to the aquatic ecosystems. And we know that there are also other ecosystems who suffer or who has been infected or impacted by the COVID-19 pandemics. Among others, as clearly mentioned by Madam Fatima, the disposal of the surgical mask and other medical waste, it has been a challenge for many countries, including Indonesia. So this is the some informations or data regarding the COVID-19 pandemic social economic impact. So I would not explain in more detail this slide, but I just would like to underline that yes, there are huge and various impact in terms of social, economic, as well as environment. So all three pillars of sustainable development has already impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So yes, of course, the current pandemic increased the vulnerability. Without the current pandemic, as I mentioned before, Indonesia is very vulnerable for various hydrometeorological disasters, not mentioning the anthropogenical type of disasters. I mean, the disaster that a man-made a disaster. So the pandemic itself, by its impact to the social and economic, most likely will increase poverty, or at least will bring down some level of community into below the poverty line. Hopefully, this is a temporary one, and we may able to reverse these conditions, and as well increase unemployment. As you may already know, that the lockdown policies and other policies has been forced us to not have normal activities, including the businesses and the work. So the situation will decreasing the adaptive capacity of the community in response to the climate change impact. So without any certain economic sources or with uncertain work conditions, of course, it will be decreasing the adaptive capacity for the community in response to climate change impact. Then it will bring Indonesia into the more vulnerable conditions to the impact of climate change. Because, we need to have a strong community to be able to adapt, to be able to fight to the negative impact of the climate change. So I just would like to share with you. I think I skipped one of the slide. I just would like to share with you some figures. This is our monitoring data, national greenhouse gas inventory during 2020. Well, it's not yet finalized because we need to verify those data, so it's still ongoing. So it's just the rough data, but just would like to show you that with reducing normal activities from the communities, from the industry, so most likely energy consumption and emissions from various sectors, including transportations, industrial processing and product, from the domestic consumption, decrease. So the lockdown and the limitations of community and individuals movement has been impacted to the reductions of the energy consumption as well as the emission from various sectors. So it's quite significant, especially during the lockdown periods. For Indonesian colleagues, you may remember that in the mid of maybe May or June last year, there was a phenomenal photograph of Jakarta showing that how clear Jakarta sky without any normal activities as the capital cities. So, and well, indeed, we measure and we monitoring the greenhouse gas emission as well as the other air pollution from time to time during the pandemic conditions, and it's reduced. It's another information. The emission in the Jakarta city, the capital city, it's from the local transportation, from the mass transportations. We record significant reductions of the greenhouse gas emission and other air pollution gas emissions. So, of course, in every disaster, despite of the negative impact of the disaster, we need to be able to take some lesson learned, because as the humankind, we need to continue survive. We need to be able to adapt with all the changings, all the challengings from the nature. So indeed, we need to learn something from the pandemic. Again, Madam Fatima has informed us various lessons learned. So I just would like to add that, with the health impact, the economic impact, the direct and indirect impact, make us change our behavior. We all familiar with the new normal term, yeah. So we are now a new person with a new normal activities, with a new normal behavior. So changing behaviors toward positive direction, it's indeed very benefit for the environmental protection and management activities. Because if we are talking about environmental impact, pollution, the environment degradations, it's all about changing behaviors. We need to change the behaviors. I just would like to bring our memory back in 1992, when the global community held so-called Rio de Janeiro Convention or Conference on Environment and Development. So one of the agenda launched at that conference was changing unsustainable consumption and productions. So meaning that we have been decade following or implementing or adapting unsustainable consumption and production. So I think it is a time, and we have been forced with the current pandemic to change our behavior, to be more sustainable, to be more healthier, and to be more concerned in our hygienist, in our livelihood, in our health condition, that kind of thing. So yeah, global vulnerability make us have transformations of development, more efficient in use of the natural resources, shorten the supply chains. So we need to adapt with the various environmental change and consideration. Next. So be ready for the climate disasters. We've been learned so much from this current COVID-19 pandemic as a disasters, but we still facing a bigger disaster, which is the climate change. Because, well, like it or not, floods, landslide, drought most likely will be more frequent. The sea level rise and abrasions, it's happening. So the heat wave, so it will bring us, if we have no effort, if we just continue with business as usual scenario, then we will need to face the food crisis, water crisis, energy crisis, and other type of crisis. So yes, I think next it's just the fact that Indonesia it's very familiar with various hydrometeorological disasters. Next, the IPCC has been told us we have to be alert, we have to be ready with the current situations, the risk of the sea level rise, increased precipitation, heavy precipitation in the equatorial, higher risk of increase of sea level rise, and other alarming. So next will be the challengings. We have a challenge, but next. Yeah, this is our challenge. We already have the NDC. We need to ensure that we following the NDC roadmap to be able to ensure that the greenhouse gas emission reduction will be maintained at a certain levels, and we be able to adapt with all the negative impact of the climate change. Next. Indonesia has already the roadmap. This is some additional mitigation action. We also have adaptation actions. But with the current pandemic, we still continuing this effort. Of course, there is a slowing down a bit, but the commitment is still there, and the effort still as strong as before the current pandemic. And my next slide is just to inform you that every single of us will play a very significant role, including the researchers, universities, academias, and all communities as a group or as individuals. So please be part of this effort. So please take your optimal roles in dealing with the climate change agenda, mitigations, and adaptation. So I thank you for the time provided, and looking forward for having the very fruitful discussions. Stay healthy, stay happy. Thank you, and back to you, Pak Purwanto. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Ibu Laksmi Dewanti, Ibu Dirjen. Ya, selamat. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any suggestion, comments, and also question for this discussion, please raise your hand. And at the moment, Bu Laksmi, we have 2 questions. Yeah, Ibu Laksmi, the first question is, do air REDD plus, yeah, this one, yeah, still running in Indonesia. How the government commitment to involve the civil society, especially masyarakat adat, to reduce forest degradation. This is from Afidatul Latifah.
Questions, please.
Yeah, please, Ibu.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for the questions, Ms. Afidatul Latifah. Yes, REDD Plus, it's still ongoing in Indonesia as a forest country with a big and huge forest resources. REDD Plus is regarded as one of the incentive mechanisms for communities, for individuals who contribute positively to the forest sustainable forest management, including the reducing forest degradations. Yeah, unfortunately, there is no slide, but I will add my slide. And before I share my slide, my presentations to the organizers, during this 5 last year, Indonesia has been able to reduce the deforestation rate significantly, almost 80% compared to 2015. So it's because everybody effort, not only government effort, but society effort, the community effort, and every single of us efforts. So yes, indeed, to be able to give a incentive or reward to those who already positively contribute to the sustainable forest management in Indonesia, we're continuing having the REDD. In fact, so far Indonesia has been, well, the result of the performance of Indonesia in reducing the deforestation has been well acknowledged by various international entities. Up to now, we already accept 3 commitments of result-based payment. Result-based payment is the payment mechanism of the REDD Plus. So we just received 2 weeks ago the payment for the Green Climate Fund for our performance in reducing the greenhouse gas emission 2014-2016. They measure it, they verify it, and they accept that indeed Indonesia reduced the greenhouse gas emission by reducing the deforestation rate. We are waiting for another payment from the FCPF. It's a special facility, carbon facility from the World Bank for payment another years of performance in reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. Bilaterally, Norway is committed to pay for the performance of Indonesia for its greenhouse gas emissions. So it's not a rhetoric. It's a factual data. We measure it, we monitoring it, and it's verified with the international standard, and they're willing to pay for that. So we continue to have the REDD. And the civil society, back since 2015, under the President's Jokowi leadership, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry has launched so-called social forestry programs. The social forestry program and its twins program, call it TORA. TORA is a Tanah Objek Agraria Reform. It's the agrarian reform, land reform. So these 2 programs giving the society, the community, the village community, the masyarakat adat, for the social forestry to have a legal access to the forest resources. So they will be given 30 years of access, so they may able to utilize the forest management, forest resources to manage the specific or the dedicated land of forest, and the target will be 12.7 million hectares for the social forestry. And one of the success story of the Indonesia compared to others, like unlike other countries, is the community participations. We are strong in community participation, maybe because we have a principle of gotong royong. So we continue to utilize and to promote this effort. So that's my response to the first questions. I will continue with the second question because what KLHK programs has been implemented to control medical waste? Yeah, before the pandemic, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry have a dedicated DG, Directorate General of Waste, Hazardous Waste, and Trash Management Control. So this DG, in fact, even before the current COVID-19 pandemic, do have a roadmap and guidance how to manage the medical waste from hospitals, from clinics. So we have a program to establish or to build or to develop incinerators with a certain standard. Maybe not at every single hospital. It's due to their capacity, but for smaller hospital, we have a communal incinerators. So all the medical waste will be sent to the incinerators and will be burned with a certain degree of Celsius to abolish or to diminish all the waste, medical waste, as well as hazardous waste, because we treat medical waste as a hazardous waste. So during the COVID pandemic, we do monitor the increased number of the medical waste from the mask, from the the vaccinated program for the hospital. It doubled. In fact, it's more than doubled. So together with the Ministry of Health, this ministry trying to manage and to bring up the scale of the incinerators and to bettering the transportations of the waste from the sources, which is the hospital or clinics, or even from the domestic household to the place, to diminishing the waste, the medical waste. It's still a challenge though. Yeah, despite effort that we have been done, we still need to increase, maybe double or triple our effort in dealing with this medical waste. The most challenging is the collections. So please start from your household to separate the waste, the medical and hazardous waste, to be treated separately with other domestic trash and waste. So that's my response. The third from Pak Haikal. The second was from Ibu Desi. Thank you, Ibu Desi. The third is from Pak Haikal Haig. How to implement community-based measure to reduce human footprint. Okay. Ministry of Environment have a program so-called climate-friendly village. In Bahasa, we call it Program Kampung Iklim. This program Kampung Iklim is a joint effort, adaptation and mitigation at the very grassroots levels, by individuals, by community, by schools, in Indonesia, kampung atau kalau di perkotaan, in urban we call it RT or RW. So climate friendly village supported by this ministry with technical assistance, with guidelines, with various modalities, if possible, for a certain level of climate friendly village, we do support financially, and we provide them with a very simple systems, a very simple tools to measure their emission. Maybe it's not yet a carbon footprint, but their emission from their activities in their village. So we introduced so-called spectrum. Spectrum is the It's a very simple toolkits for community to be able to measure their greenhouse gas emission and its reduction. And we also established so-called National Registry system. National Registry system is a system where everybody, individuals, communities, businesses, local government could be registered their performance of emission reduction and will be acknowledged by the system. So the Climate Village program members or participants will report back their greenhouse gas emission effort or their adaptations action to the registry system. So I will add my slide later regarding the Climate Village as well as the National Registry. So maybe participants, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, will later join the Climate Village programs. Yes, that's for Pak Haikal.
Okay, thank you, Bu Laksmi Dewanti. And the next question is the direct question from Ibu Hartuti Purnameni. Please, Ibu Hartuti. Ibu Hartuti. Yeah, okay. Please, Ibu Hartuti. Your microphone, please, Ibu Hartuti. Okay.
It's muted by the committee. So, to both Professor Fatima and Dr. Laksmi, I want to ask questions because it seems that the good effect of pandemic is only temporary. Yeah, as has been shown by Prof. Fatima in Malaysia and also in India. And Ibu Laksmi also showed the effect of pandemic in terms of good environmental conditions, in Indonesia. And I'm aware of that maybe this good effect is also temporary. So how about the global commitment, which is going to be like shown in the environmental summit in Glasgow soon? Do you think that this event will give good impact to our environment, since this seems very difficult to change the human behavior? They can change their behavior, but only temporarily. But how about in the long run, since we have climate change, it just not only waiting at the corner, but it's already now. So how about the effect of this international summit, do you think? Will the global commitment can be shown after that? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Ibu Hartuti, for the questions. You're referring to the Glasgow Conference of the Parties. So it's a conference of the parties of UNFCCC. It's an annual conference of the parties. And it's supposed to be last year, November last year, but due to the pandemic, it's postponed till this November. So this November will be the 26th conference of the party, meaning that we have been 26 years discussing and negotiating the climate change related affairs. So as a conference of the party, indeed the Glasgow Convention or the Glasgow Conference will have a routine agenda. The routine agenda is the COP agenda. COP agenda for this year is to finalize the rule books of Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement has launched in 2016. And till now, we still need to finalize its rule books. Rule books is the guidelines, the methodology, the procedures to be able to ensure the implementations of the commitment of the Paris Agreement. So the main agenda of the Glasgow will be to finalize the rules book. That's including the market and non-market instrument, the adaptations, global goals, loss and damage, the mobilizing the financial resources. So that's a routine agenda. And it is a time for parties, for all negotiators to conclude. Otherwise, the implementation will be a bit postponed. So beside the routine agenda, every host country or presidents of the COP, this year, UK, United Kingdom, will be the host, and UK is the upcoming presidents of the COP, Conference of the Party, have an agenda, a president's agenda. So within the president agenda, the UK has agenda in energy transition, global goals on adaptations, how to strengthen a target from the forest and land use sectors, that kind of things. So up till now, well, we've been prepared for that because last May and June, we have a preliminary discussion. Last night, there has been a consultation with the presidency. So most of the parties currently are confident that the Glasgow, if able to be held in person, because we never know yet whether it will be in virtual or in person. It's due to the current pandemics. But the UK said that most probably it's a hybrid between in person and in virtual. So we at a certain level of confidence to finalize some of the agenda. So the global commitment will remain the same. Only the strategy will be a bit modified due to the current pandemics. And in fact, as I mentioned, even despite the current pandemic, Indonesia has just submitted its updated NDC 21st of July last month. And it's the long-term and long-term for low carbon climate resilience 2050 together with the updated NDC, showing that despite of the current pandemic, we're still doing a great effort. We're still committed with the commitment, the global commitment, as well as the national commitment. So yes, I'm still crossing my finger that the COP in Glasgow will be a very successful one. Countries or parties will be able to conclude the rule books of the Paris Agreement. So then we can ensure that the long-term or the global commitment will be achieved by 2030, or in the long run by 2050, because Paris Agreement will serve until will continue to serve as a protocol till 2015. I think that's my short answer to Ibu Hatuti. Again, thank you for the questions.
Thank you very much, Ibu Lasmi Dewanti. Ladies and gentlemen, all participants, Ibu Lasmi Dewanti will follow another important meeting in the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. And please give a big applause for Ibu Lasmi Dewanti for this session. Thank you very much, Ibu Lasmi.
My applause to everybody. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Stay happy, stay happy.
Yeah, we will discuss in another event again. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next session this session, yeah, Dr. Budi Warsito will present the next topic. Yeah, that this topic is, Budi, machine learning algorithm for modeling confirmed cases of COVID-19. Yeah, so let me introduce Dr. Budi Warsito. At the present, he is the head of doctoral program of Environmental Science, School of Postgraduate Studies, Universitas Diponegoro, with the background education BSc from Gajah Mada University, as well as a master and PhD from the Department of Mathematics, Universitas Gajah Mada or Gajah Mada University, with the several working experiences as a Secretary of the Department of Statistics, Faculty of Science and Mathematics, Universitas Diponegoro, Head of Competency-Based Lecturer Group on Computational Statistics and Data Science, Secretary of Master Program of Information System, School of Postgraduate Studies, and at the present, he is the head of Master Program of Information System, School of Postgraduate Studies, Universitas Diponegoro, since 2020 till 2021, and at the moment he is the head of doctoral program of environmental science. So, Dr. Budi Warsito, time and screens of for you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prof. Purwanto. Can I share my presentation? Yeah. Can you see my presentation?
Okay, Dr. Budi Warsito.
Yeah. Thank you very much for moderator Prof. Purwanto, my senior. He is a pioneer of this seminar, ICENIS. He was the one who gave the name of this seminar about 5 or 6 years ago, and he was Dean of School of Postgraduate Studies. Thank you very much, Prof. Firstly, many thanks to Prof. Naning, Prof. Tri Retnaningsih, for giving me the opportunity to be one of the keynote speakers, joining the leading speakers, Professor Beth, Professor Fatima, Professor Elko, and also Laksmi Dewanti, ME. It is customary at ICENIS that the previous or former chairperson will be one of the keynote speakers in the next ICENIS, and he is the chairman of the ICENIS 2 years ago. So this morning, Prof. Naning giving me the opportunity to be one of the keynote speakers, and many thanks. Okay, good morning, distinguished guests and participants. In this morning, I want to present my presentation with the entitled Modeling Perspective on the Number of Confirmed COVID-19 Cases. Okay, as we know that and experience together, COVID-19 has caused so many effects and problems with the extraordinary impact. However, behind the calamity, there must be wisdom. And one of the wisdom behind the pandemic is the availability of big data on various related matters. And I think all benefit us all. Part of them is the number of confirmed. There are daily data, weekly data, monthly, and also cumulative cases. And then death cases, recovered cases, transmission rate, reproduction number, and etc. So many big data. And then vaccines doses, number of people who at least one dose vaccine, percentage of full vaccinated, etc. Besides that, the testing for data accuracy and then unreported cases also interesting for us to explore more. And then the mobility pattern change, economic growth, and economic uncertainty, and etc. I think all is big data that will make a benefit for all of us. Okay, we can see one of the example of the big data about the community mobile report from Google. we can see that there is a change in the pattern of the data in almost all aspects, I think. In retail and recreation, parks, transit station, workplace, residential, I think in almost under the baseline of the data before the pandemic. This case is taken from the data in Central Java, and in almost all aspect, the mobility tends to decrease. Yeah, except grocery and pharmacy is increased compared to the baseline. Maybe because basic needs cannot be afforded or deferred, and so in health, maybe also the different patterns may occur in other regions, even within in Java or in other location. Okay, and then the other wisdom behind the pandemic, after we get a big data, as we can make exploration more for descriptive and also inferential statistics to answer the hypothesis or before and after the pandemic. We know that in each country, region, sub-region, or district has a different patterns. Although there is a similarities, but in each region has different patterns. The consequence is that the prediction model developed can also vary. And then the models may be the same or similar, but with the different parameters. So we can make models or vary model from the big data. Okay. This is the global situation of cumulative cases from all of the world. Globally, this data is taken at the end of July 2021. There have been about 196 million confirmed cases of COVID-19. This number is about 2.5% of the population in the world. So when we can make a calculation that if there is 100%, so there will be about 2 until 3% of people who have been confirmed positive. If the sample is representative, is that so? We'll see again in the next my presentation. Okay. As well as 28 July, the total of more than 3 billion vaccine doses have been administered. We can see the increasing number of the confirmed cases for a global situation. And then this chart is a global situation of daily cases. Daily cases. We can see that there have been three waves in the first wave, the third, and then the first and the second, and then the third wave, and now we all of us still enter to the third waves of the global situation. Okay. If we look at it now, everything depends on the latest condition, whether it will be continue to increase or can it be suppressed to that the third wave. Yeah, the third wave can quickly decline, or the pandemic will. Yeah, if the third wave can quickly decline, we hope that the pandemic will over soon. Okay, this is the situation by region. We can see that in USA and America and Europe have almost the same pattern with global condition. The first wave, second, and now the third wave. I think it's the same pattern with the global condition. The first wave occurs over a long period of time, and the second wave occurs with a faster duration and higher number of cases, faster than the first wave, and it's currently entering or almost passing maybe the third wave now. The pattern is different from the Southeast Asia. Okay, we look for the cases in Africa, South Africa. It's Professor Robert from South Africa. We can see that almost all countries are experiencing a period of decline for the highest peak. Yeah. Okay. The South Africa now is in the third period or third waves, but different with the Libya, I think. Yeah. Okay. Each countries have different patterns. Okay. Okay. We look for the previous pandemic in 1918. The previous pandemic had gone through 3 periods. The first wave, and the second is the most extreme wave, and in the peak, I think is the highest peak. Yeah. Based on existing history, it happened in 3 waves, and 3 waves before the end of the global pandemic, and the second wave was the dead lice, I think. Okay. Now, how about Indonesia? The data we took the data at the end of July, 25 July. The total confirmed case is more than 3 million. More than 3 million in Indonesia. Indonesia has about 7 million population. So the total confirmed cases is about 1.3% of the total population that have been unconfirmed by this virus. Okay. In the end of July, the data reported that the Jakarta, Yogyakarta, East Kalimantan, North Kalimantan, Rio, West Papua, and Bangka Belitung have a very high incidence per 100,000 population. Okay, and then this is the daily reported trends, infection, and death. We can see that the Indonesia leads the world in the daily average number of new deaths reported, accounting for 1 in every 5 deaths reported worldwide each day. Okay, the COVID-19 infection are decreasing in Indonesia with more than 38,000 new infection reported on average every day. This is about 77% of the peak, the highest daily average reported on July 18. Okay. We can also see that the number of daily deaths is directly proportional with the number of daily new infection. This is the data of vaccination. Indonesia has administered at least 68 million doses of the vaccines so far. Yeah? Assuming every person needs 2 doses, that's enough to about more than 12% of the country's population. Okay, we also can see that the vaccination is the increasing number of population that have been vaccinated. But vaccination is still quite low, and we can see that it's not enough to affect the rise and fall of the cases. This is the data of lockdown. This chart shows how different lockdown measures were implemented during the course of the pandemic. In school, from the early of the pandemic, require closing all levels in school, and we can also see that the stay-at-home workers that stay at home, and also the borders, international borders.
Dr. Budi,
Yes.
again for presentation. We have one presenter more after this session.
Okay. How minutes, Prof. Purwanto?
3 minutes.
How many minutes?
3 minutes if possible.
Oh, okay, 3 minutes. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So we want to make a predictive model for the cases, confirmed cases. Okay. We can look that there are curvatures then can be trapped the models we put. Okay. There are many predictive model can be put, compartmental, growth, statistical, and one of them is machine learning, and so hybrid models. From the previous long-term prediction, some are not quite right, but I think it's still useful. A few months ago, in September 2020, our research team also make a research about the long-term prediction. We make a prediction, and by using the Richard curves, and the pandemic would be over in about the end of the year, I think. And the peak is the January 2021. The total number is more than 1.3 million cases, but we didn't assume that there would be a second wave. And okay, we will use machine learning for the make a short prediction, because machine learning, I think it's will appropriate for short-term prediction. This is the stage of the machine learning prediction for the first, after we make a pre-processing data, and then we make a prediction by using training and testing data. Okay, there are so many kind of machine learning. One of them is neural network, but neural network also have many kinds, and one of the algorithm is extreme machine learning. This is the algorithm, and we make a short-term prediction of the neural network by using cascade forward and also extreme machine learning. You can see that the prediction is good at the training data, and for a few days in the odd sample or testing data, the algorithm is still good. And the second is the using short-term prediction by using extreme machine learning. I think the similar result also can be reached in both training and also testing data. Okay. Okay. The interesting question, I think, when the end of the pandemic, can we predict it? Yeah. From the data, we can make long-term prediction, but we should look for the two pattern or two wave, the second and the one and the first and the second wave. We use data from the 2 March, the early of the pandemic, and until the end of July, and I have an optimistic that the pandemic will end at the end of the year by using this model, with the provision that the pattern will not change. The efforts to suppress transmission through strict implementation of public health and social measures need to be continued and accelerated. It's critical for communities to continue practicing physical distancing and etc. And hopefully that there is no third wave in Indonesia. For summary of my presentation, various models can be developed on data related to COVID-19, including short-term and long-term prediction. And this model have not accurately predicted the end of the pandemic, at least until recently. A conclusion about the correctness of prediction can only really be determined if the pandemic is really over. Nevertheless, predictions are still important to do for strategic planning purposes. And for the closing, I cite the comment from Dr. Howard Markle that the most predictable thing about this coronavirus is its unpredictability. But I still believe that the prediction model is still important for strategic planning. Okay, thank you very much for the time given to me, Prof. Purwanto. And I back the time to the latter. Thank you very much.
Dr. Budi Warsito. That the conclusion is it is predicted that the pandemic will end in December in this year. We hope all that the pandemic will end this year. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, all participants, the next presentation, the last presentation for this session is from Professor Dr. Insinyur Elko van Berg with the title Innovation Under Pressure E-Health as a Response to the COVID-19 Crisis. Professor Elko van Berg is the Professor of Organizational Theory, School of Business and Economics, Vrije Universitas Amsterdam, with the background education, BSc in Industrial Engineering and Management Sciences, also Bachelor of Education in Theology, MSc in Industrial Engineering and Management Science, MA in Theology and PhD in Management. Professor Elko van Berg also this is a consultant, organization consultant and trainer in Lentera Papua, Papua Indonesia in 2014 till 2020. As a financial consultant, Cendrawasih Air, Papua, Indonesia, and at the present, he is a full professor, School of Business and Economics, Vrije Universitas Amsterdam. Please, Professor Elko van Berg, time and screen for you.
Thank you, Professor Purwanto, and thank you for inviting me, especially thanks to Professor Tree for organizing all this together with her team, of course. It's already the second year that I'm able to present at ICENIS, and I'm very happy to see a full crowd again over here. Selamat siang semua. I would like to present a piece of research that I've been doing together with a couple of colleagues in Amsterdam in the last year related to COVID-19, which is also one of the main themes of the conference this year, and very relevant, of course, given everything still going on in our countries and especially in Indonesia right now. This is a project funded by ZonMW, which is a healthcare government-sponsored organization focused on healthcare research, basically, and they got a special COVID-19 program. So we got a grant for studying especially social care organizations in Amsterdam. And for social care organizations, you can consider organizations like NGOs, like the Salvation Army, but also the National Health Services in the Netherlands are also considered in our study. And I'll focus on especially on e-health implementation during the lockdown, but also address a couple of other issues that we got across. Let me see. Yeah. One of the reasons for this study was that we observed that, the COVID-19 pandemic reduced physical interactions to a minimum, especially during the lockdowns that we got in the Netherlands, and probably have seen the same given the measures, for instance, in Java or other places in Indonesia. or around the world, I think the pattern is about the same. So the physical interaction had to be reduced to a minimum. People had to stay at home, where possible, work from home. We're not able to go on the streets, etc. But that also gave a challenge to social care organizations, and we studied organizations that, for instance, focus on homeless people, giving them shelter, reaching out to people who have psychiatric disorders and don't want to stay well with families, etc. And they typically reside on the streets or are very vulnerable in the sense that they cannot be resilient on their own. So they need to have care from those organizations. So this organization typically rely on direct contact with those groups. Those people are typically not very well able to call upon other people, so you have to reach out physically. Yet, during the lockdown, even social care organizations were forced to work from home where possible, and were not allowed to have direct contact, at least within 1.5 meters. So they had to come up with new innovations, new ways of addressing these groups. We study how they use, especially digital aids, digital tools to address these issues. So our research question for the study was, well, how does a crisis affect an organization's innovation process and subsequent use of technology, focusing on e-health implementation? As a theoretical background for this study, well, I'm a professor in organization studies, which is a bit different from most people in the room, I suppose. Just to give a bit of an idea, we have been studying innovation implementation for decades already. So it's not a new thing that we study implementation of innovation in a certain organizational context. And what we know briefly is that, well, innovation typically is a non-linear process. Even though we try to consider innovation, let's say, from the idea phase till the end phase, as a linear process, typically it's not, if we study it in reality. It goes back and forth. There's sudden stops sometimes because, well, the innovation fails or the idea doesn't work. You have to go back one stage, reconsider the idea, prototype again, etc. So we know that it's a nonlinear process and that it has constraints, not only technical, but also in terms of understanding innovation and getting people to work with certain new innovation, etc. When considering digital innovation, e-health, especially in the healthcare sector, it's surprising that there's so little implementation of e-health so far. You might know this from hospitals or doctors or any care context in general. It typically is still relying on paper and pencils. And if people are using computers, typically standalone systems, not really integrated, not using any very fancy or recent developments. And that's the case for lots of countries, including the Netherlands, that compared to other industries, the care sector is lagging behind in terms of implementation of digital technologies. There's different reasons for that. One of them is that people don't want, people are very cautious with giving digital data because, well, health data are sensitive. That's a good reason for that. There's other reasons. Might be that professions are a bit reluctant to change, etc. But anyway, we noticed that there's relatively little implementation of digital technologies so far until the COVID-19 crisis came along, and then most organizations had to turn to digital technologies all of a sudden because they were not able to rely on the physical contact and direct communication as much as they used to. We also used a bit of studies into crisis response as a background for our study. There has been studies of crisis response, let's say firefighters, big disasters, etc. And we use that to inform our study and to see how the COVID-19 response might be different. So the research gap that we consider for this study is that, well, we know a lot about innovation and innovation implementation in general, but for the COVID-19 crisis, it's very specific, it's very unique that certain stages had to be skipped because organizations had to turn to the implementation of digital technologies overnight. There was not really a phase of preparation, etc. But well, in the Netherlands, and I think it's the same in other countries, the lockdowns were announced, let's say, a few days before they were implemented. And so organization had to consider, well, just typically one or 2 days to change their procedures, to change their ways of working, and to go on. And well, that for many organizations, you have some time because, well, you can take some time to adjust. For healthcare and social care, that's different because those people need to be cared for, even though you had to change your procedures all of a sudden. So there's a time constraint, but there might also be other constraints, like monetary constraints or cognitive constraints, as people are not able to use the technology that far. So there's a gap that we don't know how these constraints impact the implementation of innovation in this context. And so what did we do? We collected and mostly qualitative data, interviews, observations from September 2020 till May 2021. So we it's a pity that we missed data collection for the actual first wave from March 2020. Because our project only got funded by September. So we covered the first wave retrospectively by doing interviews with people who were involved in the first wave of COVID-19 in the Netherlands. We did a lot of semi-structured interviews. We had so far about 80 interviews, and for this study we have been analyzing 30 of them, while the others served as background information so far. So the interviews were with caregivers, managers, clients, etc. Lots of people involved with the vulnerable groups or vulnerable people themselves. We study 3 social care organizations with pseudonyms: Urban Care, Town Care, City Care, all based in Amsterdam. And well, most interviews are face-to-face or online if we were not able to reach out during the lockdowns. And we did participant observations at emergency shelters, hostels, walk-in houses, and residential homes where people reside. So you have to think about part of the lockdown was in the Netherlands during the winter. That means that those people living on the street, they have to be taken care of. And when they had to stay at home, well, of course, homeless people don't have homes. So the government implemented solutions that they got shelters funded by the government, where at a certain stage about 500 to 1,000 people per night were sleeping because they had to have a home somewhere. Theoretically, we use a ground theory approach of developing a new theory or inducing a new concepts. So in the Netherlands, we got 3 COVID waves so far and 2 major lockdowns. The first COVID wave was from March till June 2020 with the lockdown as well, and with people had to stay at home, work from home, shops were closed, etc. And then we got the second and third wave from December 2020 till June 2021. And the second and third wave in the Netherlands look like quite similar, but if you look into the pattern, you will see there's kind of a wave effect. And then we got a long lockdown from December until June 2021, with shops being closed, schools being closed again, etc. And now everything is almost everything is open again, thanks to the vaccines and the reduction of the number of cases in the country. So the 3 organizations that we study, are urban care, which is smallest of the three organizations, rather informal bottom-up organization, but still it's an organization with about 1,500 people, so it's not really small, but it's the smallest of the three at least. It is run by both employees and volunteers, and they they have this informal, flexible, ad hoc way of organizing and taking small initiatives and taking action. And then we have Town Care, which is a larger, rather hierarchical organization, internationally active, and but staff have flexibility and freedom to come up with new solutions. And finally, we have City Care, which is also a larger organization, but only active in Amsterdam, but also a bit more established than Urban Care. So we study the implementation of e-health in these three cases, and we find different patterns along the different phases of the COVID-19 crisis. So we analyze pre-COVID, start of COVID, and a year into COVID as three phases of development. So what we see in urban care, that this organization didn't have any vision for digital technology before the crisis. Town Care had some existing e-health solutions before the crisis, but not really implemented. And City Care, they already implement e-health before the crisis. So there's different starting phases. Then start of COVID, well, all three organizations had to shift to e-health, typically video calling as the main way of providing care, where possible, of course. Not only between the teams, but also with the clients, which was challenging because you have to consider, well, homeless people often don't have smartphones or laptops. So they had to provide the devices first and then train those people to use them, and then get to talk to them, let's say on a weekly basis, to provide care. So that has been very challenging for most of them. So for urban care, they tried it, but they perceived it was not adequate for their people they cared for. So they quickly shifted to physical contact again, even though it was kind of, well, difficult. So they for instance, met with their people, their clients, in parks or outside if they were not able to visit homes. For town care, it really triggered a more substantive implementation of e-health to finally start using e-health in the teams on a larger scale. For City Care, as they already implement e-health up front of the crisis, they saw this as an opportunity to spread it throughout the organization. So even teams that were kind of reluctant to use e-health now started to use it, and they used whatever they already got to leverage it to larger implementations. Then a year into COVID, let's say we want to see if, well, those sudden changes also a year into COVID are still there, or the people try to get back to, let's say, the old normal in a way. We definitely see that in urban care. Instead of aiming for expansion of e-health solutions, they all want, well, most responses, if not all, want to go back to physical contact, and they already did so. For town care, it's a bit different. Some people actually use and keep using e-health. Others just use it as an add-on, let's say nice to have, and if possible we can do video calling or any other tools, but it's not the preferred mode of operation. For City Care, it's different. They actually got much further with implementation of e-health, using it structurally into the organization, also turning into what they call digital first strategy. So they say, well, if you consider homeless people, for instance, being digitally available and being able to use digital tools is also a prime a condition for a good life nowadays. So they say, well, digital first, people should also be able to get treatment digitally only. So they actually went a step further and said, well, we need to consider this more seriously and go on with digital information beyond video calling. They say video calling is kind of the simple way of doing it. We can do more with digital technology and e-health. So they went on with that. So we see differences between those three organizations in that sense as well. What does explain those differences? Well, we say there's three concepts that play a big role here. One is professional identity. Many of the care providers see their professional identity as sometimes being in the way of using e-health. Lots of the professionals define their profession by physical contact. They say, well, we have a strong opinion about what we need to do, and we need to be with our clients physically. And that's what lots of professionals said. So then it's impossible to use e-health because then by definition it will change your professional identity or how you execute your profession. The second concept that influenced implementation is the shared vision on e-health. We see that the organization that had a positive shared vision on e-health up front got much further with implementation compared to organizations that had a kind of not a vision at all, like town care, or even a negative vision on e-health, like urban care. And third concept is championing and transformation practices. We see that the role of individual champions inside the organization is very important, but those champions have to be embedded in a way, so they have to have some organizational power. So some of the organizations had those champions, but for instance, town care had individuals who were very enthused about e-health, but didn't get much further because they had to deal with resistance and didn't have any, let's say, hierarchical power. With urban care, they actually had what we call negative champions, so people advocating that they were against e-health, and that had its impact as well. Regarding practices, yes.
Yeah, 3 minutes again, Professor Falco.
Sure. I'm wrapping up.
Yeah. Thank you.
We see that the number of important transformation practices are including peers and clients in developing or implementing e-health, educating about digital innovation, and coupling digital innovation to professional identity. So linking it, like they did in one of the organizations in City Care. They said, well, we have to think about e-health as e-health with a heart, not technology, but it's about providing good health services. It's not about doing things more efficient in the first place, but it's about actually providing more and better health than we used to do. So they call it e-health with a heart, not focusing on technology, but on the professional services that they deliver. So we came up with the model from left to right. Digital innovation due to crisis challenge, professional identity, and shared vision trigger championing, and that leads to different outcomes in terms of e-health implementation, acceptance, ambivalence, and resistance. And we see those three in the three different organizations. Just to wrap up, champions and shared vision do not only enable but also hinder innovation processes. That's one thing we conclude as well. We see both organizations with positive champions and positive shared visions on e-health, but also negative shared visions and negative champions regarding e-health. Was definitely a highlight from our study is the importance of professional identity in relation to implementation of digital innovations. And well, we observe that innovation during a crisis comes with many ad hoc decisions, and but still those three concepts are definitely important to implement e-health during a crisis. Thank you very much, and terima kasih banyak.
Terima kasih, thank you very much, Prof. Elko. Ladies and gentlemen, all participants, we have just time limitation on the discussion, plenary discussion. But if you have any question, suggestion, comments, apart that you have write in the Q&A. Yeah, please raise your hand if you have any question directly addresses to the speaker. Yeah. Please, first, Amar, if you have any question, Amar. Okay.
Hello?
Yes, Amar.
Yes, actually, I just joined now. I don't have any question.
Okay, yeah, because
Okay.
you
Because we
already
have different time. We have
have
interval time. Just I joined now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So from the organizing committee, please all of the question, yeah, please present in the PowerPoint. Yeah, the first question from Dodi Ferdiansah. Yeah, and then from Bu Hartuti to Professor Robert. Yeah, and then also this is the question all for Professor Robert. Yeah.
Prof.
Yeah.
Elko.
Yeah. No. This is Bu Hartuti to Professor Robert Pico. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Prof. Robert.
Thank you.
Please, Prof. Robert, you have 5 questions. This is from Dodi Ferdiansa, from Bu Hartuti Purnameni, from Adi Fatul Latifah, and this is Prof. Robert. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are very interesting questions. With reference to the first question on the number of children that have experienced crime, the cybercrime would exclude these cases. We actually have noticed an increase in cybercrime victimization. So that should be added, but the age of the children, of course, is critical here. So the older you are, the more likely you would be to be well versed to engage on the internet. But definitely so. Research in Spain I can refer to now as well. So there is definitely, due to the very nature of lockdown conditions, there's an increase in that. The second question, there's also an increased cases in cyberbullying. Is this kind of bullying also included in crime? I'm not able to see the last word. Yes, it speaks also to the first question that there is indeed a prevalence on the internet crime. Yeah, the bullying would be sort of more directed towards the younger groups and the children, as in the first question. The very interesting question from Afidal Latifa on the rising of aid institutions. You know, this is very much part of the problem, in the sense that the aid is not really proactive. We actually need political solutions for the problem here. And once again, you know, we rely on the resilience of individuals and communities and people, and here in this case, very vulnerable refugees, in order to cope, rather than actually, you know, in a more proactive fashion, deal with the real problems. The terminology resilience, I find it quite problematic, in the sense that it is originally coming from, you would know in the audience, it's an engineering terminology. And to me, in my opinion, this certainly deflects from addressing the real issues. So yes, it does help, but it's very temporary. And of course, you know, to be resilient means to return back to the state you were originally. That is doubtful. So I do question that. Then a question from Artuti Parnawaweni. The aid institutions, the difference between real philanthropic endeavors as opposed to those who are on a mission. We have noticed this problem very, you know, in the center of the whole colonization experience of both Africa as well as South America, where there are agendas. And so in the name of, saving the dark continent, the African continent, in the name of Christianity, the continent was colonized. So definitely there's, I enjoy the terminology, there's no free lunch principle, that these missions do come with agendas, and sometimes very self-serving agendas and Western-centric. That is the problem. The last question, how do we end physical violence against women and when women are harassed? Is it the closer whether they get blamed? In victimology, it is completely unacceptable to engage with any kind of victim blaming. So what's happening here is that we have got cultural stereotypes that serve to neutralize feelings of guilt when individuals engage in this kind of predatory behavior. Our research also shows that the majority of offenders do not suffer from any mental illnesses. So there's agency and the person actually can distinguish between right and wrong, but because of cultural stereotypes, they are targeting women who are dressed in a certain fashion as sort of deserving and disposable at the same time. I hope those have answered the questions. Those are the only ones I can see. How do we end physical violence against women? This actually needs to be dealt with on both the macro as well as a micro level. On a macro level, we are all aware of the notions of patriarchy, where women are seen as property together with children. That is certainly a problem worldwide. But on a micro level, social learning, because the children model their own behavior on the model, what they observe within the family environment. So that is part of the problem there. Yeah, so that would be my take on that we look at socialization in broader society as well as within the micro context. Thank you so much for those very interesting questions.
Thank you, Prof. Robert. Yeah. And then the next question for Professor Fatima. Please, Professor Fatima.
Yes, question from
Two questions. Yeah.
Yes. How to control water quality in Malaysia? Whether there is eutrophication and algal blooms? Yes. I just replied that there are many rules and regulations to control water quality, but in terms of implementation, it is not easy. Until now, our rivers, our lakes are still not that healthy, I would say. In terms of water quality index, most rivers are in the class 3 or class 4 or sometimes class 5. So this is something that is not easy to control in developing countries, which is quite different if you compare to like Japan or other rich countries where they can allocate a lot of funding for for controlling the environment. But in our countries, economically, we don't really spend money for to control our environment, and so we still have problems. Eutrophication is a bigger problem because in Malaysia, water quality index does not include the concentration of phosphorus and nitrogen, which are the main causes of eutrophication. So eutrophication really depends on the lake managers. If that particular lake belongs to certain owners, and the owners want to overcome the eutrophication, is really at that level, not really at the at the national level yet, I would say. Okay. Next question to me on the global rules and regulation. Yeah, there are many rules and regulation in terms of environmental management. Tokyo, Paris, and SDGs also address environmental health. But I still feel that each country should be committed, should take action, as long as the political environment of that country is not ready to commit. There's nothing we can do about our environmental situation. I think that's all. I think Prof. Purwanto.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Fatima. And next is a question and answer from Dr. Budi Warsito. Please, Dr. Budi.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Purwanto. The first question from Anissa. In modeling, in principal modeling, or especially for time series modeling, no super model suitable for all cases. So it is based on data, based on the characteristic of data. And in the cases of COVID-19, from my experience, for short-term prediction, non-parametric models like machine learning are better than the traditional or linear models, I think. And in from many kinds of machine learning that I have tried to the COVID data, the cascade forward neural network class, one of the class of machine learning, is better than other, but it limited to the short-term prediction. And for long-term prediction, I think the growth models like Richard curve is better, but it's still limited to the pattern of the data. If the data have only one wave, only one pattern, and the model will be better. But when there is a change in the wave, there is a second wave or maybe a third wave, and there is no longer suitable, and new model should be built, I think. And the second question from Dr. Hartuti, I agree with Hartuti. There should be a research to find why certain province or also certain region have high COVID, and because in Java, cases in Java has gone up very sharply, and in about 4 weeks ago, yeah. Then I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, then dropped rapidly because of the tight policy. We call it a PPKM for level, but at the same time, the outside Java has not yet been implemented. So the case is increasing rapidly, as happened in Java a few weeks ago. So I think the same type policy should be implemented in region to address the increasing of the cases. I think like that, Prof. Pur.
Thank you, Dr. Budi. Ladies and gentlemen, and the last Q&A is for Professor Elko. Please, Bu Hartuti, if you have any question and discussion to Professor Elko.
Thank you very much, Prof. Purwanto. Prof. Elko, I'm interested in the healthcare as an innovations in the system. Yet I agree with the research result that the attendance of doctor is very important for the patients, because doctors are not machines, right? So probably when the patients see the doctor, it will encourage the patient to be health as soon as sooner than if they don't have any real contact with the doctors. So yes, probably because I'm from Indonesia, yes. So I still have that cultural background of that seeing a doctor is more important than just talking to machine. And do you think that because I was late joining your presentations, could I know how about the percentage of the people in your research results? Like how about the percentage of people in the town area or people in the city area? And what else is the category I forgot? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I totally agree that seeing people is important in real life, right? And not only on the screen. It's also what we heard from our participants. So we only studied people in the city urban area of Amsterdam, and we focused on vulnerable groups, which is in our case mainly homeless people or people with psychiatric disorders. We also collected indeed information on the effects of COVID-19 and the distancing measures on those groups. And it's interesting that for some of the groups, the effects were also quite positive in a way, and due to different reasons. But for instance, consider people with psychiatric issues, they don't always like people to come by physically. Especially if they, let's say, a big group in our data are people with hoarding issues, so people collect all kinds of stuff, and they typically don't want to have the control of people coming by and seeing all what they did. So they feel better in a way, even though given what the care providers would say, it's not good for the people if they just go on with their kind of destructive behavior as well. So there's different sides to that. What we also have seen is that some of the people were actually getting in a better position due to the lockdowns. Some of the people have problems with processing signals, for instance. So if it was really quiet on the streets during the lockdown, so they liked the quiet metros, for instance, that it was quiet on the street, etc. But of course, it's only temporary, so it's not a long-term effect. But it definitely has been mixed. So some people like the distancing, some people not. So it's hard to say that on average the effect is positive or negative. It really depends on the person and on the situation people were in.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, all participants, to the time limitation. We have another parallel session this afternoon. So thank you very much for all speakers, Professor Robert Pieke, Professor Fatimah Muhammad Yusuf, Professor Elko van Berg, and also Dr. Budi Warsito for complete, clear, and very useful information for this plenary session. And as appreciation, please give a big applause for all speakers. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. And then, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, Prof. Robert, Prof. Fatimah, Prof. Elko, and Dr. Budi Warsito. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank
Purwanto.
you.
Yeah.
Terima kasih.
Terima
Ya.
kasih. Ya, sama-sama.
And selamat siang.
Yeah.
Selamat siang. Maybe in South Africa is still morning. Yeah. Prof. Robert.
South Africa is still, what, excuse me?
Morning, in the morning.
Yes,
yes,
now It's 7 o'clock. It's morning.
7 o'clock, yeah, 7 o'clock in South Africa and at noon in Semarang, Indonesia. Yeah. Similar time, I think, in Malaysia.
We are 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Prof.
Okay, thank you very much. And then the time and screen I gave written to the MC.
Yes, thank you, Professor Sudarto, for leading the plenary session.
Not Professor Sudarto today. Professor Sudarto is yesterday.
I'm sorry, Professor Purwanto. I'm sorry, Professor Purwanto, Professor Insinyur Purwanto DA, for leading the plenary session. Okay, next, the ICENIS committee would like to show our gratitude to our keynote speakers through certificates. We are thankful that our honorable speakers take the time to attend and talk in the ICENIS 2021. Here are the certificates for our speakers in the Day 2 ICENIS plenary session. We hope that we can keep the collaborations healthy for greater good. Once again, thank you so much for Professor Robert Peacock, Professor Fatima Yusuf, Insinyur Laksmi Dewanti, Dr. Budi Warsito, and Professor Elko Kanberg. Next up, we will have a documentation session led by my partner, Jeha.
Good afternoon, everyone, and distinguished excellencies, distinguished lecturers, guests, and presenters. Yes, I am Jeha, to be a partner of Gendis today. And before we get to the main agenda of parallel session, we would like to capture the special moment. So please, you can turn on your camera and give your best smile. All right, so I can see here our professors, Alco, Professor Fatima, Professor Robert Peacock, Professor Budi, and Professor Purwanto. Thank you so much for today, dear everyone. Be prepared. All right, okay. 1, 2, 3. Oh, all right. I need to remind because there are so many slides here. So be prepared. Just wait and just keep smiling. Okay. All right. Hanging there. Okay. I'm on slide 3 right now. Okay. Why there are so many people don't want to show your face? Okay, we will be finished soon. Right there. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have done with capturing this special moment. Once again, Jeha and Gendis would like to say thank you very much to our moderator, Professor Purwanto, and our keynote speakers for today's agenda. It was very nice. And before we go to the parallel session, I would like to share the Zoom ID. Oh yeah, everyone, please kindly to form the attendance list in the link that I have shared before on the meeting chat. There is an attendance form and you can fill the form. And here are the Zoom ID and the passcode for you to present your paper and your research. I know they have prepared your presentation. So good luck. And anyway, we will announce the best paper and the best presenter later on in the evening. So we are going to have a closing ceremony after the parallel session, and you have to join with us. And if you have any confusion, don't hesitate to chat in the chat meeting and ask the questions so the committee will answer your questions. Thank you, everyone. So good luck. Gendis and I will see you again this evening.
Okay, thank you, Gendis and Jeha.
Thank you.